Welcome to Ask the Lawyer radio podcast with attorney Brian Figueroa of the law firm Figueroa and Associates. This podcast features a recording of our most recent radio show aired weekly in New York City. We hope you enjoy the show, which features news, views, and interviews on matters such as immigration, personal injury, bankruptcy, divorce, family law, estate planning, wills and probate, deed transfers, civil rights, criminal defense, workers' compensation, and taxes, both individual and business. You can contact us at 855-768-8845 or visit us at www.askthelawyer.us. You have questions? We've got the answers.
Karl Marx's theories on the collapse of capitalism and the role of oligarchs in the Trump administration. Karl Marx, one of the most influential thinkers in modern economic and political theory, predicted that capitalism would inevitably collapse under the weight of its internal contradictions. His theories, primarily laid out in works such as The Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, argue that capitalism's inherent exploitative nature and class stratification would ultimately lead to economic crisis, social upheaval, and the rise of a proletarian revolution. Central to Marx's analysis is the role of the ruling capitalist class, or bourgeoisie, in consolidating wealth and power at the expense of the working majority, or proletariat. The presidency of Donald Trump, 2017 to 2021, offers an intriguing lens through which to examine Marx's predictions, particularly in the context of the increasing influence of oligarchs, wealthy elites who exert significant control over political and economic systems. Trump's administration was characterized by deregulation, tax policies favoring the wealthy, and a government filled with corporate executives and business magnates. Critics argue that these policies exemplify the deepening contradictions within capitalism that Marx foresaw, with wealth concentration and inequality reaching historic levels. This article analyzes Karl Marx's theories on capitalism's collapse and explores their relevance to the role of oligarchs in the Trump administration, shedding light on the structural weaknesses of contemporary capitalism and the risks it poses to economic and social stability. Karl Marx's theories on the collapse of capitalism. Marx's analysis of capitalism revolves around several core ideas that explain why he believed the system was inherently unsustainable. These include 1. Class struggle and the role of the bourgeoisie. Marx argued that capitalism is defined by a fundamental conflict between two primary classes: the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class that owns the means of production and seeks to maximize profits; the proletariat, the working class, whose labor is exploited for surplus value. According to Marx, the bourgeoisie's relentless pursuit of profit leads to increasing exploitation, worsening economic inequality, and the eventual alienation of the working class. In the context of the Trump administration, this dynamic can be observed in policies that favored corporate interests, often at the expense of the working population, such as tax cuts for the wealthy and deregulation of industries. 2. The concentration of wealth and economic inequality. Marx predicted that capitalism's competitive nature would lead to the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few, as large corporations outcompete and absorb smaller ones. Over time, wealth disparity would widen to unsustainable levels, resulting in a crisis of legitimacy for capitalism itself. Under Trump, economic inequality surged as policies such as the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act disproportionately benefited the wealthy elite, including corporate oligarchs. Meanwhile, wage stagnation and the erosion of worker protections highlighted Marx's concern that capitalism inherently fosters inequality. 3. The tendency toward crisis and overproduction. Marx believed that capitalism is inherently prone to crisis due to its tendency to produce more goods than the market can consume. This overproduction, combined with the pursuit of profit over social needs, leads to economic downturns, layoffs, and social unrest. Trump's economic policies, which focused on deregulation and short-term growth strategies, exacerbated economic instability. The COVID-19 pandemic further exposed the fragility of the capitalist system, with widespread layoffs and business closures despite massive wealth accumulation at the top. 4. Alienation of the working class. Marx argued that capitalism alienates workers from the products they create, their fellow workers, and their own sense of purpose. The Trump era saw an increase in worker dissatisfaction, union suppression, and a growing divide between blue-collar workers and corporate elites. The role of oligarchs in the Trump administration. The Trump administration saw an unprecedented level of influence exerted by oligarchs, extremely wealthy individuals with substantial control over economic and political systems. Trump's personal background as a billionaire real estate mogul and his appointment of numerous wealthy individuals to key government positions exemplified Marx's concerns about the concentration of economic power in the hands of a select few. 1. Oligarchic influence in policy making. Trump's cabinet was filled with billionaires and corporate executives from industries such as oil, finance, and technology, reflecting a government run by the elite for the elite. Some notable examples include Wilbur Ross, Secretary of Commerce, a billionaire investor with extensive ties to banking and private equity; Stephen Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, a former Goldman Sachs executive and hedge fund manager; Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, a billionaire with interests in private education and charter schools. These appointments reinforced Marx's argument that capitalist governments ultimately serve the interests of the ruling class. Policies under Trump, such as corporate tax breaks, deregulation, and relaxed environmental policies, overwhelmingly favored oligarchic interests. 2. Deregulation and the privatization of public goods. Trump's administration aggressively pursued deregulation policies that benefited large corporations and the wealthy, often at the expense of public welfare. Key examples include the rollback of environmental protections, which benefited the fossil fuel industry; efforts to weaken financial regulations put in place after the 2008 financial crisis, increasing the potential for another economic collapse; the push to privatize public services such as healthcare and education, further enriching private sector oligarchs. 3. The Trump tax cuts and wealth redistribution to the elite. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provided substantial tax relief to the wealthy and corporations, resulting in further wealth concentration at the top. According to economic analyses, the vast majority of benefits from the tax cuts went to the richest Americans, while the working and middle classes saw minimal long-term gains. Marx's critique of capitalism argues that such wealth concentration leads to a decline in the purchasing power of the masses, increasing economic instability and preparing the ground for systemic collapse. 4. The rise of populist narratives to mask oligarchic control. Despite policies that heavily favored the elite, Trump utilized populist rhetoric to appeal to working-class voters. He framed himself as an outsider fighting against the political establishment, a strategy that distracted from his administration's deep ties to corporate interests. Marxist theory suggests that such tactics serve to maintain capitalist hegemony by creating false consciousness among the working class, diverting their anger away from the real sources of their economic struggles, corporate exploitation, and inequality. Marxist analysis of the Trump administration's economic policies. From a Marxist perspective, Trump's policies can be seen as deepening the contradictions of capitalism by 1. Intensifying class divisions. The Trump administration's emphasis on deregulation, tax cuts, and corporate welfare exacerbated wealth inequality, leading to an increasingly polarized society. According to Marx, such divisions make capitalism unsustainable in the long run. 2. Exacerbating economic instability. By prioritizing short-term economic gains for the wealthy, Trump's policies contributed to structural weaknesses in the economy, such as growing debt levels, unstable financial markets, and lack of investment in public goods. These weaknesses are potential triggers for the kind of economic crisis that Marx predicted. 3. Weakening worker protections and union power. Trump's labor policies weakened the power of unions, making it harder for workers to advocate for fair wages and working conditions. This aligns with Marx's argument that the capitalist class seeks to suppress worker organization to maintain profit margins. 4. Promoting crony capitalism. Marx warned that late-stage capitalism would lead to cronyism, where economic success is based not on competition and innovation, but on political connections and monopolistic control. The Trump era witnessed numerous examples of this, with contracts, subsidies, and regulatory rollbacks benefiting corporations with close ties to the administration. The future is capitalism heading toward collapse. While Marx predicted capitalism's inevitable downfall, whether Trump's administration accelerated this trajectory remains a point of debate. Signs of growing instability include increased public discontent. Rising inequality has fueled social movements calling for economic reform, such as the push for wealth taxes and universal health care. Economic fragility. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed deep economic vulnerabilities, with the wealthiest growing richer while millions faced unemployment and financial hardship. Political polarization. The widening gap between the rich and the poor has contributed to increased political division and radicalization. Marxists argue that these trends suggest capitalism is reaching a crisis point where systemic transformation, or collapse, may become inevitable. Conclusion. Karl Marx's theories provide a compelling framework for understanding the impact of oligarchic influence in the Trump administration. By concentrating wealth and power in the hands of a few, Trump's policies reinforced the contradictions inherent in capitalism, deepening inequality, eroding public trust, and increasing economic instability. While capitalism has so far adapted to survive crisis, Marx's insights suggest that without structural reform, the system's collapse may become inevitable. The rise of oligarchic power in the Trump era serves as a stark warning of capitalism's vulnerabilities and the urgent need for equitable solutions.
In America, justice belongs to everyone, but reality often tells a different story. If you've been a victim of police misconduct, workplace discrimination, or civil rights violations, you deserve to be heard. The law offices of Figaro and Associates, led by Brooklyn's civil rights champion, Brian Figaro, fights for justice, your justice. From excessive force and wrongful arrests to employment discrimination and constitutional violations, our experienced team stands up for people of all backgrounds, ensuring their rights are protected.
Figaro here, we believe in equal justice for all. No case is too big or too small when your rights are on the line.
Call Figaro and Associates at 8557-68845 for a consultation. No legal fees unless we win. Justice starts with a single step. Take yours today. Visit www.askthelawyer.us or visit us at 26 Court Street, Suite 701, Brooklyn. Figaro and Associates, a voice for those whose rights are ignored.